have always been obsessive, which I realized very early. That's because, well, I wanted to be the very best, like no one ever was. To catch them was my real test. To train them was my cause. That's right, I was obsessed with Pokemon. I had all the cards, all the games, and knew everything there was to know. But over everything else, I had to catch them all. And I was so close. Until the day where my washing machine jiggly-puffed, destroying all my cards, all my games, and everything I had to represent my obsession. Everything was gone. That is, except for one card, Charizard, which luckily happened to be my favorite. I mean, as a fire and flying type, he can not only easily beat water types, but also learn the traits of a dragon type, making him unstoppable. Because I still had Charizard, I really didn't care about the rest. And as time went on, I won more and more battles, even though I only had a fraction of what my collection once was. You see, less was more. But in our society today, barring what seems to be the dress code of most middle school girls, there are very few examples of the less is more mentality. And as we place a greater emphasis on quantity rather than quality, we really gain nothing, change nothing, and have nothing. So today, we're all going to become Pokemasters by, first, training ourselves to see the impacts of the more is more mindset, and second, dueling to earn some solutions, and live with the less is more mentality. Something we love to overconsume is information. That's because according to Rolf Dobelli, author of The Art of Thinking Clearly, each little bit of information acts like a little bit of pleasure, because it releases the hormone cortisol, much like a small piece of candy to our brains. But as many of us who may or may not have been placed on Weight Watchers in the 4th grade know, one small piece of candy just makes us want another small piece of candy, and another, and in the immortal words of Miley Cyrus, we can't stop. As we increase our constant drive for information, we end up severely damaging our mental and physical health. Because, as Dobelli explains, as this cortisol deregulates our immune system and inhibits our brain from releasing growth hormones, we feel fear, aggression, anger, and tunnel vision, physically leading to a loss of cell, hair, and bone growth, impaired digestion, and even an increased chance of contracting an infectious disease. In so many other ways do we impact our lives by acting as if more was actually more. Take a study from the University of Kunst in Berlin. After asking all of their violinists to log their hours, the study found that those violinists who would go on to be the world's greatest spent about the same amount of time practicing as those who were just average. However, they concentrated their practice time into fewer practice sessions and focused on fewer techniques within those sessions. Simply, not trying to do a lot, but trying to do a few things deliberately and thoroughly. For a different example, take the lightest plight of many parents: Pinterest stress. In a survey of stay-at-home moms nationwide, almost half of the respondents admitted that because of the pressures of social media sites like Pinterest and Facebook, they feel they're not doing enough to be a good mother, wife, or friend. And 43% of the respondents even admitted to lashing out at their child or spouse because of the stress. I mean, the last time I walked into my mom's craft room, she shot me. Oh, granted, it was with a glue gun, but still terrifying. In our eating habits, we also see the immense damage of more. The United Nations found that food waste in the United States has tripled in the last 30 years, which translates to 40% of our food supply today ending up in a dumpster. And this isn't just a domestic problem. Consumers in the world's wealthiest countries waste about as much food as the entire net food production of sub-Saharan Africa. In so many other facets of our society, do we see the need for less is more? One example would be the recent Great Recession. In a study, Entrepreneur magazine found that the companies that were the most successful at surviving the recession were those that did not lay off portions of each facet of their business, but rather focused on their core services and made no effort to hang on to areas in which they weren't strong. See, companies succeeded with less. Even in our day-to-day lives do we see the need for less.
In his book, The Paradox of Choice, psychologist Barry Schwartz explains that as consumer choice increases, consumer satisfaction actually decreases. Because endless choices lead to paralysis rather than liberation. In the most basic sense, this is the concept of diminishing returns, which we also see in our dreams of the biggest house, the nicest car, not a financial issue in sight. But in a recent study, The Atlantic found that past a certain point, a point not much higher than the average American's income, as we make more money, we become less happy. Not only are we unhappy with more, but we are harming ourselves just by having or doing more. Like when we pump our kids full of antibiotics for nothing more than the common cold, and now, according to the CDC, are left with 2 million infections each year because of bacterial resistance. Or like when our lawmakers vote to begin yet another educational initiative, even though we found repeatedly that placing our time and tax money into just one is far more effective. Or like when our kids feel a looming societal pressure that they must do everything, but in the end, destroy their mental health. Jack Chen of Woodson High School in Fairfax, Virginia, had a 4.3 GPA, was a football captain, and was extremely well-liked by his peers. Yet, in the note he left to his parents, Jack wrote, "There is just too much stress in my life from school and the environment it creates. Expectations from sports, expectations from my friends, and expectations from my family." And on Wednesday, February 26th of 2014, Jack, at just age 15, walked to nearby tracks and stepped between the rails as a commuter train approached. Because it was just too much. From wherever those expectations arise, we must encourage everyone in our society to do and ask less. Because until we do that, we will be left with more and more of our teens writing their final word, as Jack did. Goodbye. So, just as this problem impacts so many areas of our lives, it seems like the solutions would be just as vast. But just as there is a simple process to training a Pokemon, there is a simple process to less. Step 1. Choose your battles carefully. The minute that you forget that you can't do everything is the minute that you begin to spread yourself too thin. Step 2. Only keep your best Pokemon. Edit your life ruthlessly, and make sure that those things that are the most important to you are really given the time and attention that they deserve. And forget the rest. Perhaps the Duggars, or the famed family from 19 Kids and Counting, otherwise known as Joshua, Janet, John David, Joe, Jussit, Ginger, Joseph, Josiah, Joanna, Jedediah, Jeremiah, Jason, James, Dustin, Jackson, Johanna, Jennifer, Jordan, Grace, and Josie, could heed the less is more lesson and just stop. Now, I'm not saying they need to get rid of any of their children, although it is a modest proposal. Step 3. Use your potions wisely. Pope Francis, the most popular pope in modern history, a popey master, if you will, ditched the elaborate papal quarters for a simple Vatican hotel room, because he felt that this way he could be a better pope, by being more normal and more visible. Take him at his word when he explains, in order to love life, we do not need to fill it up with things. Rather, we must live with less. Because less is more. And you see, of course there are times in our lives where we must do or have a lot of something, but these must be deliberate choices. And so, just as I may hang on to parts of my Pokemon obsession, well, in the end, I don't gotta catch 'em